I was born on the 5th day of July, 1764, in the parish of Aldgate, London. My parents, who were of the Jewish persuasion, were by no means in affluent circumstances. They might, however, be considered as in the middling class of society, and though their family was large, they contrived to bestow a tolerable education on all their children. They justly conceived this to be an object of the highest importance, as it concerned their future welfare in life, and therefore used every effort in their power to accomplish it. I was accordingly sent at a very early age to a Jewish school, where I remained some years, and was instructed in English grammar, writing, arithmetic, and those branches of education which are usually taught in schools. I was also instructed in the Hebrew language, in which, before I quitted school, I made considerable progress. Being blessed with a robust and vigorous constitution, and enjoying excellent health and spirits, I engaged at this early period of my life in several contests with boys considerably older than myself, till I at length attained such a reputation for courage, activity, and strength, that none would venture to contend with me, and I was acknowledged by all of them to be their master. Whenever I returned home with a black eye, or any external mark of violence, my father never failed to inquire strictly into the cause, and would reprove me severely when it appeared I had involved myself wantonly in a quarrel. But on the other hand, if he found I had acted only in self-defense, or from any justifiable motive, he would freely forgive me, and declare he would never exert his paternal authority to prevent me from standing in my own defense, when unjustly assailed, being well aware that courage is not only useful, but almost indispensably necessary to carry us through life. In justice to the memory of my father, I must mention that perhaps no man had a clearer notion of the difference between true and false courage than himself. He would often declare how gratified he felt in seeing resolution and fortitude displayed upon proper occasions, though at the same time no one could hold the character of a bravado or quarrelsome man in greater abhorrence. His observations on this subject I have often reflected on, and I trust they will never be effaced from my memory. Feeling the utmost aversion to a life of idleness, and unwilling to become an encumbrance upon my father, I gladly availed myself of the first opportunity of employment that offered, and therefore entered into the service of a fruiterer and greengrocer in our neighborhood, from whom and whose family I experienced, during my stay with them, very kind and liberal treatment. I was here frequently drawn into contests with the butcher and others in the neighborhood, who, on account of my mistress's being of the Jewish religion, were frequently disposed to insult her. In a short time, however, I became the terror of these gentry, and when they found that young as I was always ready to come forward in her defense, they forbore to molest her. My next situation in life was with a tea dealer, in whose service I fought the first pitched battle that attracted the attention of the public. This was in the year 1780. I was then only 16 years of age, and the occasion of my fighting arose from the following circumstance. A porter, who had been sent to our house with a load, upon my offering him the price of a pint of porter as a gratuity for himself, rejected the offer in a contemptuous manner, and made a demand of double the money. At this moment my master entered the shop, and, remonstrating with him on the impropriety of his behavior, the fellow became still more abusive and challenged him to fight, upon which I turned him into the street, and told him that since he was so desirous of fighting, I was at his service, and that I felt myself fully competent to punish him for his insolence, and was willing to give him instant proof of it if he pleased. He accepted my challenge with great eagerness, and most probably flattered himself with the hopes of gaining an easy victory over a youth, being himself a stout athletic man in the prime of life. A ring being consequently formed in the street, we immediately set to, and, after a severe contest of about 3/4 of an hour, my antagonist confessed himself unable to stand longer against me, and gave in. Upon this occasion Mr. Richard Humphreys, whom I shall frequently have occasion to mention in the course of these memoirs, was my second. This battle, which first brought me into public notice, laid the foundation of the fame I afterwards enjoyed. The spirit and resolution I displayed throughout a contest with an antagonist of much superior strength excited the general applause of the spectators, many of whom were intimately acquainted with me, and became the general subject of conversation in the neighborhood for some time after. Shortly after this, one of my friends called upon me and informed me that, having witnessed such uncommon exertion on my part in the last contest, he had matched me to a fight with a man in the Mile End Road. On the ensuing Saturday, being a leisure day with us, I had never before fought for money, and felt some reluctance to a battle of that sort on the present occasion. However, as my friend had made the match, I was unwilling to disappoint him, and therefore resolved to use my utmost exertions in his favor. Accordingly, at the time appointed, I met my opponent, and here again had to contend against superior strength, but after a contest which lasted near an hour, had the satisfaction once more to come off victorious. Mr. Humphreys was likewise my second on this occasion, and when some of the spectators called out to him to direct me where to strike, I well recollect hearing him reply, "There is no need of it, the lad knows more than us all." Though the success of these two battles had gained me great repute for courage, as well as for skill and activity, I had not then any intention of devoting my future life to the practice of pugilism, nor of quitting the situation in which I was engaged. But on my return to my master on the Monday following, he expressed great displeasure at my having fought the last battle, and immediately discharged me from his service. Shortly after I was dismissed from the service of the tea dealer, I was invited to join some friends in celebrating a Jewish festival, and we accordingly agreed, by way of frolic, to disguise ourselves and represent a party of sailors, in which I was to bear the part of the lieutenant. This frolic, however, which seemed likely to produce a great deal of merriment and diversion, had a very unpleasant termination, for happening to meet with a press gang, I and two of my friends were actually made prisoners by them, and it was not without considerable difficulty that we procured our release. This, however, we effected after 2 days' confinement. Soon after this I entered into the service of a tobacconist, who resided in the neighborhood of Whitechapel. I was engaged by him chiefly for the purpose of traveling with samples of the various articles he sold, and to procure orders for him, etc., and having been sent into Kent on some business of this sort, was drawn into a pugilistic contest from the following circumstance. Walking on the road near Chatham Barracks, part of a regiment of soldiers happened to pass, I believe the 25th, but am not certain, when one of the sergeants accosted me in a very rude manner, and ordered me, in a peremptory tone, to get out of the way, and upon my remonstrating with him on his uncivil behavior, struck me a severe blow with his halberd. Feeling my indignation roused to the highest pitch at this treatment, I could not refrain from offering to fight him on the spot, and he readily accepted my challenge. At this moment a party of sailors happened to come up, who, having inquired into the cause of this contest, assured me of their determination of seeing fair play. We accordingly stripped and set to, and after fighting for nearly an hour I had the satisfaction of coming off completely victorious, and of inflicting a severe and deserved punishment on my antagonist, in revenge for the ill treatment I had borne from him. One of the officers of the regiment, who, in the first instance, seemed rather inclined to take the part of my opponent, was so much gratified at witnessing what he was pleased to term an uncommon instance of spirit and resolution in a youth, that he immediately presented me with 5 guineas, and afterwards exerted his influence with effect in procuring orders for my employer. As for the behavior of the sailors, it was so truly noble and generous, and made so deep an impression on my mind, that I cannot forbear relating it. These gallant sons of Neptune watched every turn of the battle with the most anxious solicitude, and when it terminated in my favor, expressed their congratulations at my success in the most friendly manner, and cheered me with loud and repeated acclamations. They afterwards carried me with them in triumph to Gravesend, a distance of 8 miles, and as the bags which I had out with me containing the different samples of merchandise were, in the course of the affray, thrown down and trampled on, it became necessary for me to return to town for a fresh supply, and I accordingly came up with them on the same boat. On my return my master expressed his surprise at seeing me again so soon, but on my relating the cause and giving him an account of the battle, he expressed the greatest satisfaction at my conduct, and told me that so far from being inclined to blame me for my behavior, he thought I deserved the highest commendation for having acted as I had done. I returned almost immediately afterwards to Chatham, and transacted the business on which I was sent before, and was prevented in the manner I have just related. On my return to town, I was induced, at the request of some of my acquaintances, to engage in a pugilistic contest for 5 guineas, with a man who had signalized himself in many instances, and who the most sanguine of my friends expected would prove a formidable opponent. Having mentioned the subject to my master, and requested his permission to fight, he very readily granted it, and was afterwards present at the battle. On this occasion the friends of my opponent were so confident of his success, on account of the evident superiority he possessed in size and strength, and the reputation he had already acquired, that they offered bets of 5 to 1 in his favor. Notwithstanding which, however, when I engaged with him, I had the satisfaction of having my exertions crowned with success, after a hard contest of an hour and a quarter. I was about this time induced to quit the service of the tobacconist upon the prospect of a situation of more emolument. The remuneration I received from him was very trifling and inadequate to procure me many little enjoyments I wished for. I therefore eagerly embraced an offer that was made me of a situation in which I was to receive 1 guinea per week, and my board, which I at that time could not fail of considering a most liberal remuneration for my services, more especially upon being given to understand that my employment would be to assist in conveying different sorts of merchandise from the coast to various places to be disposed of, and that I was to be furnished with an excellent horse for that purpose. As the application was made to me from a quarter that I had always considered as respectable, I had not the least suspicion of there being anything illegal or improper in the concern, but immediately upon my engaging in it I was informed that I was hired for the purpose of escorting smuggled property, and was likewise told that I should be expected to guard and protect, even at the hazard of my life, whatever might happen to be entrusted to my care, against any seizures that might be attempted to be made thereon. This certainly was most unwelcome intelligence to me. I am not aware of ever having wanted resolution and courage upon proper occasions, but was not desperate enough to disregard entirely the consequences of such a dangerous profession, and having learnt that one of our party had, but a few weeks previous to this, lost his life in an affray with some revenue officers, I quitted my employment in disgust, having remained therein only 4 or 5 days. Shortly after my return to town, I was induced to engage in another pugilistic contest, for being present one day in company with a young man at a fight at Kentish Town, my friend happened to be grossly insulted by a man whom I challenged in consequence, and we accordingly set to, when after a contest of about half an hour he was forced to give in, being so severely beaten as to be scarcely able to stand, and, indeed, he was obliged to be carried off the field. I had now so completely established my reputation for a thorough knowledge of the theory and practice of the art of pugilism, that my friends as well as myself were desirous that, instead of seeking fresh contests, I should avail myself of the fame I had already acquired, and make such a use of my skill as would enable me to derive from thence a regular and liberal income. And being now applied to by several gentlemen to teach the art of self-defence, I was induced, in consequence of the number of such applications, to open a school for that purpose in Chapel Court, behind the Royal Exchange. Mendoza subsequently engaged in several spirited bouts with Humphreys, in the ring and outside of it. The most celebrated of this was one fought at Doncaster. The following is a contemporary newspaper account of it as cited in Pugilistica. September 29th, 1790, is rendered memorable in the annals of pugilism by the well-fought third battle between the celebrated pugilists Humphreys and Mendoza. An inn-yard at Doncaster was pitched upon as the spot for the decision of the contest. The time and the place were capitally chosen. The ground was bounded on 2 sides by the backs of houses, at one end by the inn, at the other by a strong palisade, behind which ran the river. Upwards of 500 tickets at half a guinea were sold, and the persons admitted. But the Yorkshire tykes of humbler means were not to be baffled, and a 'cute ferryman having brought over some hundreds at 6d. a head, the crowd outside soon demolished the paling, stout as it was, and an immense concourse got in. The spectators seated around the stage, however, prevented any inconvenience or interruption of the principal performers. At about 10:30, Humphreys made his appearance, immediately followed by Mendoza. The former mounted the stage, which was about 4 feet high and 24 square, with astonishing agility, evidently in high spirits. Mendoza also seemed equally alert and devoid of apprehension. Ward seconded Humphreys, and Jackson was his bottle holder, Colonel Hamilton being chosen by him as his umpire. Tom Johnson was second to Mendoza, and his bottle holder Butcher. Sir Thomas Aprice, who was umpire for Mendoza on his last battle with Humphreys at Stilton, was also chosen on this occasion, and Mr. Harvey Aston was mutually agreed upon as the third umpire should any altercation arise during the combat, and a difference of opinion arise between the Colonel and Sir Thomas with respect to its decision. Everything being thus arranged, the combatants began to strip. Odds were laid 5-4 in favor of Mendoza, and readily accepted by Humphrey's friends, who considered that, although perhaps it might be impossible for him to beat the Jew by carrying on the fight regularly and in a scientific style, yet by his impetuous exertions at the commencement. Round 1. The onset of Humphreys was bold and astonishingly vigorous, but was repelled by Mendoza with equal force. They mutually closed, struggled, and both fell. Round 2. The same vigorous spirit was manifested on both sides, but Humphreys struck the most blows, though apparently without overpowering Mendoza. Round 3. This round was fought with much caution on both sides, each being equally careful of giving or receiving a blow. What passed, however, were in Mendoza's favor, and it terminated by his giving Humphreys a knock-down blow. Round 4. They engaged, but only for a few moments. Round 5. Humphreys aimed a severe blow at Mendoza's stomach, which he dexterously stopped and struck him in the face. This blow, however, Humphreys returned, but at the same time fell. A number of rounds after this took place, but in every one of them Mendoza evidently had the advantage, and odds had risen 40-5 and 10-1 in his favor. Humphreys continually fell, sometimes in consequence of blows, but more frequently from a policy often used in boxing, which perhaps may be considered fair. Several times he sunk without a blow, which conduct, although contrary to the Articles of Agreement, was passed unnoticed, as his general manners placed him above the suspicion of cowardice. For although he had undoubtedly the worst throughout the battle, he fought with great resolution, and even when his friends perceiving him conquered, and one eye perfectly closed, persuaded him to yield, he solicited to fight a little longer. Notwithstanding all this display of excellent bottom, he was again obliged to acknowledge the ascendancy of the Israelite. Mendoza was very much cut about the side of his head, his left eye and ear being much mutilated, and he had received a severe cut in the ribs on the right side by a projectile left-handed blow of his antagonist. Humphreys had several hits which drew blood under his left arm. His right eye was closed early in the battle, and he had a severe cut over his left. He had a wound, clear as a razor cut, by the left side of his nose, by a straightforward springing blow of Mendoza's. The same hit also split his upper lip. He was carried through the crowd on the shoulders of his friends, who conveyed him in a post-chaise out of the town. Mendoza walked on the race ground on the town moor for some time after the combat, the observed of all observers. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.